Right on. Yeah, God is good. How many of you had a good Easter? All right. Yeah, some people had a great Easter. I had an amazing Easter because God is, the journey goes from high moment and we're like, oh, I can just hold on to that next high moment and that next high moment. But what do we do to sustain ourselves throughout all of it? This is what we want to talk about as we go into the next 3 weeks. We want to talk about how to maintain that kind of victory. What is it that provides that foundation to sustain the life and the victory that Jesus has won in our life? And so that's what I want to talk about. And so we're calling it Invest for Success. Invest for success. Success on your journey of faith. Where do we need to make the proper investments to assure that my journey of faith continues to move forward? Not just on the high points, but even through the valleys, even through those difficulties, that I continue to move forward in that journey. Because what we invest in matters. What we invest in matters. There's people all over the map that say, oh, you got to invest in this. Oh, you got to invest in this. Oh, here's the right investment that's going to change everything. And sometimes, it's just like, really? Is that supposed to be the case? But we're so desperate sometimes to find the right answer that we're like, I guess I'm going to try whatever. And then we crash and burn and we're like, I guess that wasn't it. But truly, it does matter. And I just want to assure many of you today, because we talk in terms of investment and stuff like this, we are not talking about money. We're talking about something far more important than money. There are things that are more important than money. And some of you are like, really? Because it's money that's going to keep me secure in the future. Is it? Or are there other things that really sustain us past that level? It says in Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. See, this is what we often do when we talk about investment. I got to invest so that I get the benefits. I get some kind of fruit out of this. There is something good that happens in me. That is traditional investment. I got to have a return on investment that is worthwhile. And he's saying, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. He starts using this term value. There is a value placed on people here. That this value is something that we cannot miss along the way. It says, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you should look to the interests of others. See, in this verse, there's multiple things that naturally, many times, are seen as very financial-like terms. Value, I got to have value in this. And he says it's not money, it's people. We got to readjust our mindset to say, you know what, really what's important and valuable are the people that God has around me. And then it talks about interest. We all want interest, right? There's no value if we don't get interest. And some of us are like, yeah, it doesn't matter how good the interest rates are. Because some of you are like, well, when I have an investment, I want it to be there. When I have a loan, I want it to be low, right? So interest can vary different ways. But if I pour something in, if I make an investment in something, it better have a good interest rate. And see, and when it talks about those interest rates, it doesn't matter if you don't make an investment. It could have the best interest rate in the world. Someone could say, this pays off 20% annually. And you're like, woo, let me jump in on that. But if you don't put any money in, if you don't put any investment in, if you don't put any of yourself in, you get no benefit. But here's the thing that he's saying. The interest that we're talking about is the interest of others, once again. That I got to invest in people's lives in such a way that I'm not reaping the interest, that they're reaping the interest, that the value comes back to them. He's saying if you're going to invest for success, it's not about me getting the rewards, it's about finding the rewards that other people experience. And that's a tough mindset change for all of us because we're naturally wired to be very selfish, very myopic. We see the world based on how it affects us. But he's saying, hey, let's start looking at how this affects you. And if it affects you positively, how can I pour myself into that to continue to build that up? Look to the interest of others. Look so that they get benefits along the way. Where we invest matters, and relationships are what keeps us going. If we're going to experience something great in God, we're like, God, I just want to hold on to that. Let me continue on there. And he says, okay, here's the key. Get with some other people. They're going to help you move forward in your journey. And you're like, no, but I just want these moments. I mean, we love those moments where we just feel good. Oh, that was just a good feel-good experience. I felt God doing something there. And we just never sustain. Some of you might have been at church for a long period of time or whatever. Maybe you haven't been at church for a while because you're like, I just got there. I sensed that there was something real that happened at one point, and then I really couldn't keep it going. But how well did you invest in the people around you so that it continued to move forward? See, because that is the key. See, I love it. You know, where we get to that passage in Philippians 2, 3, and 4, but no verses by itself. He says, hey, here's the deal. Here's what you need to invest in, and it's people. Value people and invest for their interest and pour yourself in. But to get to that place, it's in Philippians 2, 1 and 2. It says this, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete, he says. If you've experienced something good in God, here's what you need to do. And then he goes into this investment in people. And so we asked at the beginning, how many of you had a good Easter? I don't think you had a good Easter just because you got some good candy, you got the right thing, you got to wear pastels and it wasn't frowned upon. You know, that's not the point. The point was hopefully God did something real and wonderful in your life. And you got to hold on to that. And so if God did something good, if you've shared in his grace at all, if God is stirring something in your life and you're like, I don't know, I just got to experience some more of that. He says, here's how you experience more of that. Pour yourself into people. And this is what we have to understand, because ultimately, in order to maximize the return on investment, we need others on our journey. We need others. We need them. No matter how spiritual, no matter how long you've been doing this, no matter what titles you got by your name, you need people to help you along the journey. We always say we're helping people take their next step with Jesus. It's not just like, okay, get up and go do it. It's like, how can we come alongside, build that relationship to help you move forward? And if we don't allow others to come into the journey, we miss the point. No matter how strong we feel, people are key. See, when we're going to look at this, we're going to hit 3 weeks on this investing for success, and we're going to hit different components of that relationship building. And today, we just want us to focus on what is it that I need to do to start the process of making the investment. And we're going to look at this relationship that happens in the Bible between Elijah, the prophet, and Elisha, the prophet. And so what happens in this story is Elijah is a man of God. He hears the voice of God. He communicates it to people. And honestly, Elijah's killing it. There are times in your life that you're like, man, I got this thing dialed in. It seems like everything I do turns up roses. Some of you are in that space right now. Some of you are like, no, I'd like to be in that space right now. But if you got into that space, how would you respond? See, because Elijah's in a space where everything he's doing is just locked into God, and so he's seeing fruit and productivity. And so you would think, because he's seeing fruit and productivity, that everything is going to be easy. But we get to this crazy space, and I just want to understand that here's where Elijah's at when we get to 1 Kings 19. And then we're going to talk about that a lot. And I want you to pour into 1 Kings 19 if you're going to pour into your Bible at all this week, which I recommend highly you do. But it says, you know, in 17 and 18 of 1 Kings, Elijah is one of the few prophets of the Almighty God, one of the few prophets of Yahweh in Israel, the people of God. And in fact, there's a whole bunch of false prophets that are coming in, these prophets of Baal. And they start coming in, they start taking over, and they're confusing people's minds, and they're leading them astray and going different directions. And pretty soon, they kill these leaders that like the prophets of Baal. They kill all of the prophets of God. They killed them, and Elijah's left alone. And so Elijah says, well, it's time to step up. I'm just going to call them out. Rather than sit back and wait for them to come to me, I'm going to come to them. I mean, that's how bold this dude is. But he's like, I trust my God. And so he calls a fight, basically, a fight between gods on the mountain. He says, hey, let's go to this mountain and let's set up altars and let's see whose God is real. That's what he does. And so the prophets of Baal, there's like hundreds of them. And so he has this battle against hundreds of prophets of Baal, and it's just him on the mountain. And he says, you guys go first. If you guys do this, I'll submit. And so they try to do their thing. They try to get everything going on. Nothing happens. And so finally he sets up his altar and he says, okay, God, I need you to show up because I don't know what else I'm going to do. And God shows up. Read the word. It's awesome. He shows up. Fire comes down from heaven, takes care of everything there. And the people of Israel go, oh man, we've missed it. That's the real God. And so right after he's having this dance party on hundreds of false prophets, all of a sudden Elijah, you would think, would be like, woo, I'm living the dream. Look at how awesome I am. He goes into a deep depression. He goes into a deep depression just because the queen of the land says, I'm going to kill you by tomorrow. If I see you, I'm killing you. And so he goes into a depression and he goes on the run. Some of you, that's a natural response. When God does something powerful and wonderful in our life, something like an Easter experience, and we're like, God, I want to experience that kind of life, all of a sudden we get beat down. And we get beat down and the enemy tries to steal what God is doing in our life. And we're like, I don't know where to turn. I guess I'm just going to go on the run and I'm going to hide away. And some of you are in that space right now. And Elijah, the man of God, the prophet that was crushing it, was in that space. And so God still takes care of him. He's on the run and God meets his need. And he says, okay, this is where I want you to go. And he meets his need. And then he speaks to him. And Elijah responds back to him. And then he goes back on the run again. And then we have this experience. And it says in 1 Kings 19, 13, and 14. Then a voice. See, the presence of God passes by him. And he says, okay, God, I just shroud myself from this because I can't experience the holiness of the God that I serve. But the voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing? See, that's the question that probably some of us need to hear today. What are you doing here? And you're like, I just need something. I'm broken. I'm hurting. I'm lost. Remember, that's where Elijah was at. He wasn't going from this space of victory. He says, I experienced victory, but right now I'm struggling. He says, what are you doing here, Elijah? And so Elijah responds to God, and he replies, I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. And then he says this, and it's very important, and I am the only one left. What's the problem that Elijah's having? It has nothing to do with the power of God. He believes in the power of God. He's experienced the power of God. The problem that Elijah is having is he's alone. And aloneness is a problem, no matter how tied into God you are. God did not wire us to go alone. He did not wire us to make this journey, to find success in our spiritual journey by ourselves. And he says, I'm the only one left. This is so important to Elijah. This is the second time he has that conversation. It says it. He also said it in verses 9 and 10 as well, just before this. It's like a replay of the same thing. Sometimes we feel like I'm just saying the same things to God. God, I'm coming back to you, and it's the same deal. I feel alone. I can't make it by myself. See, no matter how much success, no matter how much spirituality we have, no matter how much time with God we have, there are times in our journey that we're hurting and alone. And God says, in order to sustain my work, you need people. You need people. And so this is what he does. He says, okay, Elijah, here's what I want. I want you to go find this guy. Go find this guy. And this is important because everyone, I want us to hear this today, every single person that we look around the room for, every single person that you drive down the street that you see, every person at your workplace has value. Every single one of them, even the ones that don't think like you, believe like you, whatever, they have value. Even the person that cuts you off in traffic this week has value. Let's find ways to show that rather than disparage. But everyone has value, but to truly invest in people, if we're going to invest for success, you need to find your people. I need to find my people. We need to find our people. That doesn't devalue other people to say, you know what, there's just a few people that I need to invest in because they're going to help me move forward in my journey of faith. You got to find your people. See, and it's not often what the world thinks of. You're like, okay, if I'm going to go find my people, a lot of times we just look at the closest people to us and go, I guess it's you people. And that's not always the best option. I'm just telling you. Don't elbow the person next to you and go, yeah, see, come on, man, he just said. No, I'm not saying that. But sometimes we got to get out of our comfort, get out of our seat, get out of our situation, and find the people that God has for us for this season. We got to find our people. There's a reason why people say find your people, because they don't get found. They're not just popping up in front of us. And once again, I'm not saying devalue anyone else, but there are people. Jesus had his people. Jesus had 12 dudes that he hung out with and 3 that he really hung out with. And see, I'm asking you to find those 1, 2, 3, 4 people that are your people. Find your people. If we're going to invest for success, we got to know who they are. And it's oftentimes when we look for people, we're just like, okay, I'm going to go do what the pastor said. I'm just going to go find my people. And we look for people that are like us, that think like us, and do everything like us. And that's probably a bad idea. I'm just saying. That's what we do, and all of a sudden we wonder why we go down this weird, skewed road. That's how cults start. Just saying. You know what I'm saying? Let's just find everyone that does it like me. And then you realize, this is crazy. Yes, because you in some ways are crazy. Normal, thank you. Yeah, it is a normal. Crazy's normal. That's why we got to find people that give us a different perspective. And sometimes our people, if we're going to find our people, they even say, dare I say, they have a different generation. What? See, in church, way too often, I'm just going to say it and throw it out there, way too often in church, we just go unigenerational. Everyone's got their area, and you just go with the people that are your generation. But sometimes we need people that are in a different generation to spark something in our life. And we need to find those people. Find those people. So anyway, Elijah says, I can't do it. I'm the only one left. And God says, why don't you go find Elisha? Elisha. All right, I have no idea who that guy is, but let's do it. And he says, this is where you need to go. And he goes on his way. And this is what it says right here. So Elijah went. There's a process of going. He didn't just look around and find him. He went somewhere, had to take a journey, had to go out of his comfort and his space, had to get out of what he was doing. And he went and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, plowing a field. What kind of common ground is here? Elijah's the man of God. Elisha is a farmer. And you're like, oh, what are we supposed to do? What kind of common ground are we supposed to have? But God had sent him and said, this is one of your people. Go find him. And it says there were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. I like that. You know, there's so much going on in our world, so much going on in life. I just want to go find the first person. He has to go to the very last guy to find his guy. He goes to the guy that was plowing with the 12th team. And Elijah went over to him, threw his cloak across his shoulders, and then walked away. What a start of a great relationship, huh? Super awkward. I mean, he just walks up. This dude's plowing a field. He's just down there. I mean, it's hard work. I mean, he's plowing. He's getting the ground all tilled up and stuff like this. All of a sudden, he walks up, throws his cloak over him, and walks away from him. You're like, dude, this guy's weird. But no, there was something that we don't understand about the way things were done back then. When someone wanted to make an investment in someone's life, this is what they would do. When there was a person of God, when there was a good teacher, when there was a mentor type person, they would walk up and they would cover them with their cloak as an act of, I want to make an investment in you. I want to pour myself in you so that you get to experience what I'm experiencing. I want you to truly be part of who I am. This is what he was saying. So Elijah made this declaration, made this statement to Elisha. He threw the cloak on and then he walked away because that was what he had to do. Now he had to say someone could receive it, someone couldn't. Even though there was this deep-seated honor and respect that went along with it, we got to understand that not everyone would receive this. And so he went and he made a hand. It's risky to find your people, but it's well worth the risk. Are we going to make that investment or are we not? See, because he throws the cloak on him, he says, I want to embrace you. I want to teach you everything that I know about this journey with God. Can we share this journey together? And then he had to see how he would respond. Because it says this in 1 Kings 19 and 20, the next verse. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Why? Because he had left. He's like, I got to stop the oxen. They're going to keep running on the loose. He says, stop. And so he says, okay, he ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, he said, and then I will come with you. Go back, Elijah replied. What have I done to you? He's like, what have I done? And so he had to receive the mantle. He had to receive that call to have that deep relationship. And he says, if you don't receive it, you don't have to receive this. If you got other things to do, if you're too busy, if this is not the right time for you, I get it. But I'm just giving you this opportunity, but don't come because of me. Come because you think God is doing something in this relationship. Is God stirring this relationship, or is it just something that we're thinking about? And so he says, what have I done to you? And so he allows Elisha to make the choice. Because there's no relationship that's worth investing in that only goes one way. You got to have that depth. In order to invest for success, you got to have a depth of relationship that's mutual. And Elijah says, I need a mutual relationship. It's not just about me pouring into you, it's about you pouring back into me. And if you're not willing to get there, you're not the person. But I think you are. And so he took that risk to invest himself in that way, and then he waited to see the shared investment. He waited to see how Elisha would respond. Elisha showed some initial interest, but how would he really get to? And then we see this. And so he returned from following him, took the yoke of oxen and sacrificed them, and boiled their flesh with the yokes of the oxen, and gave it to the people, and they ate. And he arose and he went after Elijah and assisted him. All of a sudden you see, wait a second, this guy poured himself into me, and now I'm pouring myself back into him. He saw this mutual relationship starting to develop. See, all of a sudden he saw Elisha was all in. Crazy thing is the oxen were all in too, and they didn't have a choice about that. That's just wrong and nasty. But no, it's not just about killing a slew of oxen. It's about saying, I can't leave anything behind me that is going to be comfortable for me to come back to. Because if I do, I'm naturally going to come back when it gets weird. And when we're pouring ourselves into a relationship with someone, there are times when it gets weird. I'm just telling you. There are times in every relationship it gets weird. And if we have our old way of life, if we have our old system, I'll just jump back into that, thank you very much, because this isn't working out for me. And he says, I'm a farmer. I know I'll go back to farming. He's calling me to something else. He's calling me to a depth of relationship in God. And if I don't get rid of my farming equipment, I'm not going to go all the way in for God. See, some of us, when we find our people, you got to show that you're all in by saying, my life's going to change a little bit. My life's got to change because I got to go all in with this person. And so he says, this is God calling us into this relationship. He poured himself in me. I see God pouring this out. I'm going to make an altar and celebrate what God is doing in this relationship. And then what does he do? I love it. As a symbolic act, he gives all of the food that he just barbecued on the altar to the Lord, and it says he gave it to all the people in the community. Why? Because this mutual relationship was going to be a blessing to everybody. It wasn't just going to bless Elijah and Elisha. It was going to be a blessing for others. When we make the right investment in our people, it blesses people beyond us. Because we need that type of relationship. And so he does that. He pours it out and he says, here. And everyone ate. Everyone got to celebrate this. And so Elisha then went after him and said, now I'm going to pour myself into you. I'm going to give to you, Elijah, the same way that you're giving to me. See, we have this wrong mindset in the world that it's just, if you're the mentor, you always got to be downloading information onto the mentee. But the right relationships with our people, it goes both ways. And see, if you've got a mentoring-mentee relationship that you're not allowed to speak into, that's the wrong relationship. I'm just telling you. My people have full right to speak whatever they need to into my life. Because I can't think that I made it all on myself. Elijah didn't say, well, I'm the man of God. You're going to listen to me and do it my way. He says, I'm the man of God and I need help. Elisha, will you help? And Elisha says, yes, I'm all in. Let's figure this out. That's what we need. Because once we make that mutual investment, we see the mutual fruit, we see the value start to develop, we need to expect impact from your investment. Expect impact. When you found your people and you say, well, I'm going to pour myself into you, and they respond and say, I am in. Let's pour ourselves mutually into one another. All of a sudden, you're like, I can hardly wait to see what God does. The problem is, we want to write the story. We all have our own idea and say, well, this is the way it's going to work out. This, I can already see the way it's going to work out. We don't get to write the story. God's the only one that gets to write our story. But we can expect a good ending. We can expect some positive things coming out of it. And see, there was an expectation that God was going to do something impactful and something real and wonderful. And by the end, in 2 Kings 2:9, see, once again, we went from 1 Kings 19 when they first started connecting, Elijah and Elisha. And all of a sudden we get to 2 Kings. All of a sudden we go to a whole nother book. And in 2 Kings 2, there's this transition. Why? Because Elijah had poured himself into Elisha. And Elisha had poured himself into Elijah. And because of that relationship, there was a passing of the mantle, a passing of the authority that was going to happen. And so the people of God would receive that benefit. And so we get to that spot, and in 2 Kings 2:9, it says, when they had crossed, now they crossed the Jordan River on one of their journeys, and they had been going a whole bunch of different places because Elijah was like, dude, I'm getting near the end. God showed me it's about to end for me, and so I got to accomplish everything I got to accomplish now. And so he's doing crazy amounts of stuff, and Elisha's right there with him like, what do we got to do? What do we got to do? And so they had crossed the Jordan River, and Elijah said to Elisha, tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you? You got one last request. We've poured ourselves into each other. What is it you're looking for? And check this out. There is a boldness. There's a courage in the relationship. And he says, let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. Whoo, that's a big ask right there. Because Elijah had been doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Once again, he did a dance party on 450 prophets of Baal on a mountaintop. He had seen fire come down from heaven. He had done, just to get across the river at that point, it says that he took his cloak and he slapped the water. The waters of the Jordan River parted and he walked across it. This dude does miracles without even thinking about it. And this is what Elisha says. He says, I want a double portion of what you got because I'm not sure that I can do this by myself. Once again, the only reason this works is in community. So give me a double portion. Give me someone to work it with me. Give me that person. And so he says, all right, if you stay with me to the very end, it's going to be so. But you got to stay with me to the end. And it says then he walked on. And Elijah is one of those few people in the Bible. There's just a few people. But he did not experience a physical death. He was actually carried up into heaven. That's pretty awesome. That's how close this guy was with God. And he says, if you stay with me and we stay connected to that level, then we're going to experience this. And all of a sudden, he watches him go up into heaven. He's like, whoa, that's lousy. In fact, he ran after him and said, I don't want you to go. I'm sure Elijah's like, bro, I want to get to heaven. Get off me, son. You know, but he grabs a hold of his cloak and he tears a piece off because it's so violently going up and he's violently pulling down. Sometimes there's that tension, right, in our relationship. And he pulls a piece of his cloak off. And all of a sudden, he's gone and all he's got is a cloak. He's like, oh, my gosh. I got a piece of cloak, but do I have a double portion of your spirit? And so he walks back towards Israel, back towards Jerusalem, and in order to get back there, he's got to go across the river once again. And so what does he do? He says, well, I don't know how to do this apart from Elijah, and I saw Elijah strike the water with his cloak, and it parted, so I got a piece of his cloak. He hits the water, it parts, and he walks back in the same way he and Elijah walked out. All of a sudden, you see God affirming, I am in this relationship. I am doing something good because of this. And check this out. In 2 Kings 2:15, he says, when the group of prophets, because they've been starting to develop the faith of God once again in Israel. And so the faith of God is coming back because of the work of Elijah and Elisha together. And so there's prophets being developed in different areas. And the prophets that were in Jericho, which is the closest city to the Jordan River, they're watching what's going on. They're like, oh, what's Elisha and Elijah doing? Because they had just told Elisha, hey, your master's going to be taken from you. And he's like, yeah, I know, but we'll see how it goes. And so they watched and it said, when the group of prophets from Jericho saw from a distance what had happened, that the waters parted and Elisha came back, they exclaimed, Elijah's spirit rests on Elisha. And they went to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. So he got what he needed. When you have your people, when you find your people, you can expect God to do what God needs to do. But are we making the investment in those people? I'm not going to get into this week. We're going to talk about it next week. What does it mean to really make that investment? Today, what I want us to focus on is, who are your people? Do you have your people? Some of you are like, well, yeah, look, I came to church with somebody today. Those people have tremendous value. And some of them might even be your people, but honestly, some might not. And you need to find someone that's your people. I'm not saying break up these relationships that are around you. I'm not saying that. But find the depth of the relationship that takes you to the next level. Find that person that you're like, wait a second, I need this person. Don't settle for what's comfortable and what's right there. In order to make an investment, it requires a cost. In order to find your people, you need to go hunting. You need to go searching. You need to allow God to speak into it. See, maybe this is the first step for many of you. If you're going to find your people, you need to take some time this week and just pray. God, I need some people. I've experienced your goodness. I've experienced your grace. But I'm starting to erode. It's starting to get tougher. I need someone that's going to help me here. Find your people, and he's going to point it out. And when he points it out, you're like, I need to have courage and go ask him. Will you meet with me? Will you connect with me? Will you share the awkward times so that we can grow in this relationship together? See, you need that. And then just watch God do something wonderful. And you're like, wow, I never would have thought. So hopefully we all get to that point that we look back on our story and go, whew, I never would have thought that person would add that much value into my life. Because we never know what God's going to do when we find our people. But just trust that God knows what he's doing. But are we committed to finding those people? That's how we invest for success. Some of you are already thinking, I believe it. God, I've been praying hard. God, show people who their people are. Some of you are already thinking about it right now, and you know, man, I'm supposed to reach out to that person. I'm supposed to make the awkward conversation. Will you join me in this journey of faith? When we get awkward and we get real, God gets powerful and good. So the next question I have is, what investment can you make to find partners for the journey? Can you find your people, and then what investment are you supposed to make? How are you supposed to invest yourself to start that journey? Like Zeke said at the beginning, we're starting groups in a couple weeks. Sometimes that's an initial step for us to do it. You're like, I don't know where to find people. You know, what am I supposed to do? You stand awkwardly at the door at church when people are walking out. Are you my people? Are you my people? Or you just pour yourself in certain ways in like a group. And all those people in that group will speak into your life, and you're like, wow, that was really good. But then you'll find one or two in that group and go, oh, I think these might be my people. These might be them. But if you don't put yourself in that group, you don't know that you're going to find them. So we invite you, not because you need something else to do. You don't need something else on a week. That's not why we have groups. We have groups so that people will find their people, so that God can be glorified and we can continue to take a step with him. So let's pray together. God, we thank you today that you have done a work in our life. You are doing a work in our life. You are filling us with your grace. You are leading us into a mountaintop experience. Many this week have had such a dynamic experience with a God that's created them, that loves them. But God, the enemy wants to steal, kill, and destroy. He's trying to rip it away. And so God, help them to see that it's not right for them to do the journey alone. Help them to commit to finding their people. Help each one of us to know that is valid and important in our life. God, I pray for those that are sitting in here in this space. And we've been talking about finding your people, but they don't even really know that they know you, Jesus. And I pray that today, right now, that you will reveal yourself in a very powerful, real way. God, that people today that don't have that relationship with you will all of a sudden turn and say, okay, Jesus, I don't know what it is, but I feel that I've got to turn myself over to you. So Jesus, today, I ask you to come into my life. I ask you to forgive me of my sins. I ask you to guide me on a path of hope and life and victory. And God, as I go after that life and victory, help me as well to find the people that are going to help me on the journey. I surrender myself to you today, Jesus. Work in me, work through me, and work amongst us as your people. In Jesus' name, amen.